In the shadow of towering castle walls, where loyalty is measured in blood and silence can mean the difference between life and death, one man's oath to protect will be tested beyond imagination. When whispers of betrayal echo through marble corridors and innocent lives hang in the balance, Captain Marcus Aldrin must choose between blind obedience and the voice of his conscience. Some secrets are too dangerous to keep, and some truths too powerful to ignore. In the kingdom of Aldris, where political marriages seal fates and royal blood carries both privilege and peril, a single moment of courage will shatter the careful balance of power that has held the realm together for generations. What happens when the very people sworn to protect the crown discover that the greatest threat comes from within the palace walls themselves? This is the story of a guard who dared to look beyond the gilded curtain of royalty and found something that would change his life and his kingdom forever. The morning mist clung to the battlements of Castle Valdris like ghostly fingers, reluctant to release their grip on the ancient stones. Captain Marcus Aldrin stood at his post, his weathered hands gripping the pommel of his sword as he watched the sun struggle to break through the heavy clouds. 25 years he had served the royal family, 25 years of unwavering loyalty and silent dedication. His dark hair, now streaked with silver at the temples, caught the pale light as he surveyed the courtyard below. The kingdom of Aldris had prospered under King Edmund's rule, but prosperity came with its own set of challenges. Political alliances shifted like sand, and neighboring kingdoms watched with envious eyes as trade routes flourished and the royal treasury grew fat with gold. Marcus had seen 3 generations of royalty come of age within these walls, and he understood better than most that power was a double-edged sword that could cut both ways. Princess Isabella, now 16 and blossoming into a beautiful young woman, had always been Marcus's favorite charge, though he would never admit such favoritism aloud. Her quick wit and compassionate nature reminded him of her late mother, Queen Catherine, who had died in childbirth when Isabella was merely 10 years old. The princess had inherited her mother's auburn hair and emerald eyes, but more importantly, she possessed the same kind heart that had made Catherine beloved by the common people. The recent arrival of Lady Morgana Blackthorn at court had changed the atmosphere within the castle walls. King Edmund, lonely after 6 years of widowerhood, had been completely enchanted by the striking woman with raven-black hair and pale blue eyes. She carried herself with the confidence of nobility, claiming descent from an ancient house in the Northern Territories. Her mannerisms were refined, her conversation intelligent, and her beauty undeniable. Within months of her arrival, the king had announced their engagement, much to the surprise of his advisors and the barely concealed dismay of his daughter. Marcus had noticed subtle changes in the castle's routine since Morgana's arrival. Servants who had worked faithfully for decades were suddenly dismissed for minor infractions. New guards, handpicked by Lady Morgana herself, began appearing at strategic positions throughout the castle. These men bore no resemblance to the seasoned veterans who had protected the royal family for years. They were younger, stronger, and possessed an intensity that made Marcus uncomfortable. Their loyalty seemed directed not toward the crown, but toward their mysterious benefactor. The princess had grown increasingly withdrawn since her father's engagement announcement. Marcus often found her wandering the castle corridors late at night, her face troubled and her steps hesitant. When he questioned her about these nocturnal wanderings, she would simply shake her head and retreat to her chambers. The vibrant young woman who once filled the halls with laughter and song had become a shadow of her former self. During the long hours of his watch, Marcus began to notice other disturbing patterns. Lady Morgana held frequent private meetings in the tower room that had once served as Queen Catherine Solar. Strange visitors came and went under cover of darkness, entering through a little-used gate in the eastern wall. These men bore the rough appearance of mercenaries rather than diplomats or nobles. Their conversations with Morgana were conducted in hushed tones, but Marcus's trained ear caught fragments that spoke of payments, timing, and something called the arrangement. The royal physician, Master Aldwin, had served the family faithfully for over 30 years. Marcus had known the old man since his early days as a young guard, and they had developed a friendship based on mutual respect and shared concern for the royal family's well-being. It was Aldwin who first voiced the suspicions that had been growing in Marcus's mind like a poisonous vine. "Something troubles me greatly, my friend," Aldwin confided during one of their evening conversations in the castle's herb garden. "The king has been different since Lady Morgana's arrival. His moods swing wildly from euphoric joy to deep melancholy. He speaks of plans and changes that seem unlike the careful, measured ruler I have served for so long." Marcus leaned against the stone wall, his eyes scanning the shadows automatically. "I've noticed the changes as well. The new guards, the midnight visitors, the way the servants walk on eggshells around her. Something doesn't feel right." "There's more," Aldwin continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Lady Morgana has requested access to the royal apothecary. She claims to suffer from terrible headaches and needs special remedies. But the herbs she requests, they're not for headaches, Marcus. Some of them are dangerous in the wrong hands." The old physician's words sent a chill down Marcus's spine. His military training had included basic knowledge of poisons and their effects. He knew that certain combinations of herbs could be used to influence a person's mind, making them more susceptible to suggestion or causing gradual deterioration of their faculties. "Have you spoken to the king about this?" Marcus asked. Aldwin shook his head sadly. "I've tried, but he dismisses my concerns as the worries of an old man who doesn't appreciate his newfound happiness. He's completely under a spell, Marcus. I fear what might happen if someone doesn't take action soon." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps on the garden path. Both men fell silent as Princess Isabella emerged from the shadows, her face pale and drawn. She moved with the careful precision of someone trying not to make noise, but Marcus's experienced I caught the slight tremor in her hands and the way she kept glancing over her shoulder. "Princess," Marcus said softly, "you should be in your chambers at this hour." Isabella looked at the two men with haunted eyes that seemed far too old for her 16 years. "I couldn't sleep," she whispered. "The nightmares, they come every night now." Marcus and Aldwin exchanged worried glances. The princess had always been a sound sleeper, and nightmares were completely unlike her usual cheerful disposition. "What kind of nightmares, my dear?" Aldwin asked gently, his physician's instincts taking over. Isabella wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to ward off a chill. "I see my mother," she said, her voice barely audible. "She's trying to tell me something, but I can't understand the words. She looks frightened." "Marcus, my mother was never frightened of anything, but in these dreams she's terrified." Marcus felt his heart constrict at the pain in the young woman's voice. He had been present at Queen Catherine's deathbed, had seen the serene peace on her face as she drew her final breath. The idea that Isabella was being tormented by visions of her beloved mother in distress was almost unbearable. "Dreams can be influenced by our waking fears," Aldwin said carefully. "Perhaps the changes in the castle are affecting your sleep more than you realize." Isabella looked directly at Marcus, and he saw intelligence and awareness that surprised him. "It's her, isn't it? Lady Morgana. There's something wrong about her. I can feel in my bones." Before either man could respond, the sound of voices carried across the garden from the castle's main hall. The king's laughter, loud and slightly slurred, echoed through the night air, followed by Morgana's melodious voice speaking words too soft to distinguish. Isabella flinched at the sound, as if it caused her physical pain. "I should return to my chambers," she said quickly. "If she finds me out here—" She didn't finish the sentence, but the fear in her voice was unmistakable. Marcus watched the princess hurry away, her slight figure disappearing into the darkness of the castle corridors. The protective instincts that had driven him throughout his career as a royal guard were screaming warnings that he could no longer ignore. Something was desperately wrong in the kingdom of Aldris, and the evidence was mounting that Lady Morgana Blackthorne was at the center of it all. Over the following days, Marcus began conducting his own quiet investigation. He spoke carefully with longtime servants, observed the new guard's routines, and kept detailed mental notes of the strange visitors who continued to arrive under cover of darkness. What he discovered made his blood run cold. Lady Morgana's background was far more mysterious than she had initially claimed. The northern house she supposedly descended from had died out decades ago, their land seized by the crown for treason. The real Morgana Blackthorne had been a child when the family was destroyed, and there were no records of any survivors. This woman, whoever she truly was, had assumed a dead person's identity with remarkable skill and planning. The new guards were not from Valdres at all. Marcus recognized the accent and fighting style of the Northern Mountain clans, fierce warriors who served only gold and had no loyalty to any crown. Their presence in the castle could only mean that someone was planning something that would require significant force to accomplish. Most disturbing of all was the information Marcus gleaned from the castle's steward, an honest man named Thomas who had managed the royal household for over 20 years. Lady Morgana had been asking detailed questions about the kingdom's finances, the location of the royal treasury, and the procedures for succession should anything happen to the king. These were not the casual inquiries of a woman about to become queen, but the calculated probings of someone with ulterior motives. Marcus knew he was walking on dangerous ground. If Lady Morgana suspected that he was investigating her, his life would be worth very little. But his oath to protect the royal family compelled him to continue, even as the evidence of a vast conspiracy began to take shape in his mind. The woman calling herself Morgana Blackthorne was not who she claimed to be. She had infiltrated the castle with a specific purpose that involved removing obstacles to power and wealth. King Edmund, under the influence of whatever substances she was feeding him through her special remedies, was becoming increasingly unstable and making decisions that served her interests rather than the kingdom's. Princess Isabella, as the rightful heir to the throne, represented the greatest threat to whatever plan was unfolding. Marcus realized with growing horror that the young woman's life was almost certainly in danger. The nightmares, the fear, the way she moved through the castle like a hunted animal all pointed to someone who sensed mortal peril but didn't fully understand its source. As Marcus stood at his post in the pre-dawn hours, watching the first pale light of another day struggle through the persistent mist, he made a decision that would change the course of his life and possibly the fate of the kingdom. He could no longer remain a passive observer to whatever evil was brewing within the castle walls. His oath demanded action, even if that action meant challenging the king himself and the woman who had so completely enchanted him. The time for silent watching was over. Marcus Aldrin, captain of the Royal Guard, was about to step from the shadows and confront a conspiracy that threatened everything he had sworn to protect. The battle for the soul of Valdres was about to begin, and he would not let Princess Isabella face it alone. The decision to act came to Marcus in the cold hours before dawn, as he watched Lady Morgana's silhouette move across her tower window like a predator stalking prey. 3 weeks had passed since his conversation with Princess Isabella in the herb garden, and the situation within Castle Valdres had deteriorated with alarming speed. The king's behavior had become increasingly erratic, swinging between moments of childlike joy and fits of paranoid rage that left the entire court walking on eggshells. Marcus had spent those weeks carefully building a network of allies among the castle's loyal servants and guards. Not everyone had been swayed by Lady Morgana's charm or intimidated by her mercenary enforcers. Thomas the steward proved invaluable, his position allowing him access to correspondence and financial records that painted a disturbing picture of the kingdom's immediate future. Master Aldwin continued to provide crucial insights into the king's deteriorating condition, while several veteran guards who had served alongside Marcus for decades quietly pledged their support to whatever action he deemed necessary. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Sarah, a young kitchen maid who had served the royal family faithfully for 5 years, approached Marcus with information that made his blood run cold. Lady Morgana had been requiring special meals prepared in her private chambers, meals that were then delivered to the king with strict instructions that no one else was to handle the food. The ingredients she requested were unusual, often requiring trips to apothecaries in distant towns rather than using the castle's well-stocked kitchens. "She watches me prepare everything," Sarah whispered to Marcus during a chance encounter in the castle's lower corridors. "Never lets me out of her sight when I'm making the king's special dishes. And there are always these little packets of powder that she adds herself, telling me they're spices from her homeland. But, Captain, I've worked in kitchens all my life, and those powders don't smell like any spice I know." Marcus felt the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with horrible clarity. Lady Morgana wasn't just influencing the king through seduction and manipulation. She was systematically poisoning him with substances designed to cloud his judgment and make him increasingly dependent on her guidance. The gradual deterioration of his mental faculties, the wild mood swings, the paranoid episodes, all pointed to careful, calculated poisoning over an extended period. Armed with this knowledge, Marcus knew he needed irrefutable proof before he could take action. Accusations against the king's beloved fiancée would require evidence so compelling that even Edmund's compromised judgment couldn't dismiss it. The challenge was obtaining such evidence without alerting Morgana to his investigation or putting his allies at risk. The opportunity came during the Festival of the Harvest Moon, an annual celebration that brought nobles from across the kingdom to Castle Valdres. The Great Hall was filled with music, dancing, and elaborate feasts as the nobility celebrated another prosperous year. Lady Morgana, resplendent in a gown of midnight blue silk adorned with sapphires, commanded attention from every corner of the room. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting congratulations on her upcoming marriage and speaking knowledgeably about matters of state that should have been beyond her purview. Marcus watched from his position near the throne, his trained eye cataloging every interaction, every subtle signal that passed between Morgana and her network of supporters. He noticed how certain nobles, men he had known for years as loyal subjects of the crown, now deferred to her opinions and sought her approval before speaking. The corruption was spreading like a disease through the very heart of the kingdom's power structure. King Edmund appeared to be enjoying himself, laughing loudly at jokes and dancing with enthusiasm that would have been charming if not for the slight tremor in his hands and the occasional moments when his eyes would lose focus entirely. Marcus recognized these symptoms now, understanding that they were the result of whatever substances Morgana was feeding him. The once sharp ruler who had successfully guided Valdres through war and peace was being reduced to a puppet, dancing to strings pulled by a master manipulator. Princess Isabella attended the festival, as protocol demanded, but Marcus could see the strain in every line of her body. She moved through the social obligations with mechanical precision, her smiles never reaching her eyes, and her responses to well-wishers brief and formal. Several times during the evening, Marcus caught her looking directly at him with an expression of desperate hope, as if she sensed that he might be the only person in the castle who understood the true nature of their situation. The crucial moment came near midnight, when most of the guests had retired or were too deep in their cups to pay attention to anything beyond their immediate conversations. Marcus had positioned himself near the servants' entrance to the Great Hall, a location that allowed him to observe both the main festivities and the constant flow of staff members carrying food and drink between the kitchens and the celebration. Lady Morgana approached King Edmund with a silver goblet filled with what appeared to be the same spiced wine being served to all the guests. But Marcus's keen eyes caught the subtle difference in color, the slight effervescence that shouldn't have been present in ordinary wine. As she handed the goblet to her besotted fiancé, Marcus saw her lips move in words meant for his ears alone, and the king's face took on the slack expression that Marcus had learned to associate with his most compliant moods. This was the evidence he needed, but obtaining it would require split-second timing and considerable risk. Marcus waited until Lady Morgana was distracted by a conversation with several northern nobles, then moved swiftly toward the king's table. Using a technique he had learned during his military service, he managed to exchange the king's goblet for an identical one filled with ordinary wine, palming the doctored drink with movements too quick for casual observation. The substitution went unnoticed, but Marcus knew his window of opportunity was closing rapidly. Lady Morgana would soon return her attention to the king and might notice that something was amiss. He needed to get the goblet to Master Aldwin for analysis, but first he had to navigate the crowded hall without arousing suspicion. As he made his way toward the exit, Marcus felt a hand grip his arm with surprising strength. He turned to find Princess Isabella beside him, her face pale but determined. Without speaking, she positioned herself between Marcus and the main body of the hall, using her body to shield his movements from potential observers. Her quick thinking and courage in that moment reminded Marcus powerfully of her mother, and he felt a surge of protectiveness that strengthened his resolve. "Be careful," Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible above the music and laughter. "She has eyes everywhere, and I fear what she'll do if she discovers what you're attempting." Marcus wanted to reassure the young woman, to tell her that everything would be fine and that her nightmare would soon be over. But he had too much respect for her intelligence to offer false comfort. Instead, he simply nodded and continued toward the door, carrying with him what he hoped would be the key to unraveling Lady Morgana's conspiracy. Master Aldwin was waiting in his chambers, having been alerted earlier to the possibility that Marcus might need his expertise during the festival. The old physician's hands shook slightly as he accepted the goblet, but his eyes were sharp and focused as he began the delicate process of analyzing its contents. Working by candlelight with equipment that had served him faithfully for decades, Aldwin carefully separated the wine into its component parts. He tested for known poisons first, then moved on to more exotic substances that might be used to influence behavior and cognition. The process was painstaking, requiring multiple tests and careful observation of reactions between different chemical compounds. "This is sophisticated work," Aldwin murmured as he worked. "Whoever prepared this mixture has considerable knowledge of herbalism and alchemy. The base appears to be a combination of substances designed to increase suggestibility and reduce critical thinking, but there are other components I don't immediately recognize." As the night wore on, Marcus found himself pacing the physician's chambers like a caged wolf. Every minute that passed increased the risk that Lady Morgana would discover his theft of the goblet. He had something far more sinister than simple mind control. The physician pointed to a small dish containing a crystalline residue. This compound is designed to accumulate in the body over time. In sufficient quantities, it would cause organ failure that would appear to be natural causes. Lady Morgana isn't just controlling the king, my friend. She's slowly killing him. Marcus felt the world shift beneath his feet. The conspiracy was even darker than he had imagined. Morgana wasn't planning to rule through a puppet king. She was planning to become a widow and claim the throne through her marriage rights, with Princess Isabella either eliminated or so thoroughly discredited that her claim to succession would be meaningless. "How long?" Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. "At the current rate of poisoning, I would estimate the king has perhaps 2 months before the damage becomes irreversible," Aldwin replied. "Less if she increases the dosage, which she might do if she suspects discovery." Marcus realized that time was running out faster than he had anticipated. Whatever action he was going to take would have to happen soon, before Lady Morgana could complete her plan and consolidate her power. But he also knew that any move against her would have to be decisive and overwhelming. There would be no second chances. The sound of heavy footsteps in the corridor outside made both men freeze. Marcus extinguished the candles with quick, efficient movements while Aldwin hastily concealed the evidence of his analysis. They waited in darkness, listening as the footsteps paused outside the door, then continued down the hallway. "We're running out of time," Marcus whispered. "She knows something is wrong, even if she doesn't know exactly what we've discovered." Aldwin nodded grimly. What do you propose to do? Marcus had been asking himself the same question throughout the long night. His options were limited, and all of them carried enormous risks. He could attempt to confront the king directly with the evidence, but Edmund's compromised mental state made it unlikely that he would accept accusations against his beloved Morgana. He could try to expose her publicly, but she had built a network of supporters who would likely dismiss any charges as the paranoid fantasies of jealous courtiers. The most direct approach would be to arrest Lady Morgana and her mercenary guards, but that would require overwhelming force and absolute certainty of success. If the attempt failed, Marcus and his allies would certainly be executed as traitors, and Princess Isabella would be left defenseless against whatever retribution Morgana might devise. As Marcus weighed these impossible choices, a new voice spoke from the shadows near the chamber's entrance. Both men spun toward the sound, hands moving instinctively toward their weapons. But the figure that emerged into the dim light was Princess Isabella, her face set with a determination that reminded Marcus of her warrior queen grandmother. There is another way, Isabella said quietly, but it will require courage from all of us, and it will mean accepting that some battles can only be won by those willing to sacrifice everything for the greater good. Marcus stared at the young woman, seeing not the frightened girl who had wandered the castle corridors in terror, but a potential ruler who had inherited more than just her mother's compassion. Princess Isabella had a plan, and Marcus realized that the time for half measures and careful maneuvering was over. The final confrontation with Lady Morgana and her conspiracy was about to begin. Princess Isabella's plan was both brilliant and terrifyingly dangerous. As she outlined her strategy in Master Aldwin's dimly lit chambers, Marcus felt his admiration for the young woman's courage warring with his protective instincts. What she proposed would put her directly in harm's way, but it might also be their only chance to expose Lady Morgana's conspiracy before it was too late to save the king and the kingdom. She trusts me to be weak and frightened, Isabella explained, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was suggesting. Morgana sees me as an obstacle to be removed, but not an immediate threat. She believes I'm too young and too grief-stricken over my father's condition to pose any real challenge to her plans. That misconception is our greatest advantage. The princess had been conducting her own investigation, moving through the castle's social circles with the invisible status that often accompanied royal children. Servants spoke freely around her, assuming she was too sheltered to understand the implications of their gossip. Nobles discussed sensitive matters in her presence, treating her as a decorative fixture rather than an intelligent young woman with keen observational skills. What Isabella had discovered was chilling. Lady Morgana's network extended far beyond the castle walls, reaching into the merchant guilds, the military hierarchy, and even the religious establishment. She had been systematically placing her allies in positions of influence throughout the kingdom, preparing for the day when she would need broad support to legitimize her claim to power. The plan involved using the upcoming royal wedding as a stage for exposing Morgana's true nature. The ceremony was scheduled to take place in just 10 days, with representatives from every noble house in Valdris expected to attend. It would be the perfect opportunity to present evidence of the conspiracy to the entire power structure of the kingdom simultaneously, making it impossible for Morgana to suppress the truth or eliminate witnesses. But the plan required Isabella to play a dangerous game of deception. She would need to convince Morgana that she had accepted her future stepmother's authority and was eager to help with wedding preparations. This would give Isabella access to Morgana's private chambers and correspondence, allowing her to gather the final pieces of evidence needed to build an unassailable case. Marcus felt his stomach clench with anxiety as he listened to the young woman describe her strategy. Princess, what you're proposing is incredibly risky. If Lady Morgana suspects your true intentions, she won't hesitate to eliminate you. The woman we're dealing with has already demonstrated that she's willing to kill for power. Isabella's green eyes flashed with a fire that reminded Marcus of her warrior ancestors. Captain Aldrin, My father is being slowly murdered. My kingdom is being stolen by a usurper, and innocent people will suffer if we fail to act. I would rather die trying to save them than live safely while evil triumphs." Master Aldwin placed a gentle hand on the princess's shoulder. "Your mother would be proud of your courage, child. But Marcus is right to be concerned. One mistake, one moment of suspicion, and you could be dead before we have a chance to help you. That's why we need a comprehensive plan with multiple safeguards," Isabella replied. "I won't be going in blind or unprepared. Captain Aldrin, I'll need you to position your most trusted guards at strategic locations throughout the castle. If something goes wrong, I'll need immediate backup. Master Aldwin, I'll need you to continue monitoring my father's condition and be ready to provide medical evidence of the poisoning when we make our move." Over the next hour, they refined the details of their dangerous gambit. Isabella would approach Lady Morgana the following morning, claiming that she had experienced a change of heart and wanted to build a closer relationship with her future stepmother. She would volunteer to help with wedding preparations, particularly the arrangements for the private ceremony that would precede the public celebration. The private ceremony was a crucial element of Morgana's plan. According to tradition, the king and his bride would exchange vows in an intimate setting with only close family and advisors present. This would legally establish Morgana as queen, giving her significant power even before the public celebration. If anything happened to the king between the private and public ceremonies, Morgana would be in an unassailable position to claim the throne. Marcus's role would be to maintain his normal duties while secretly coordinating with loyal guards and servants to build a network of witnesses and supporters. He would also need to identify and neutralize Morgana's mercenary guards when the time came for action. The foreign soldiers were the most immediate threat to any plan that involved exposing their benefactor. Master Aldwin would continue his analysis of the king's condition while preparing detailed documentation of the poisoning evidence. He would also need to have antidotes ready in case they could save the king's life once Morgana was removed from power. As dawn broke over Castle Valdris, the three conspirators separated to begin their dangerous game. Marcus returned to his duties with a heavy heart, knowing that he was sending a young woman into mortal peril while maintaining the pretense that nothing had changed. Every instinct screamed at him to find another way, but he also knew that Isabella was right. Conventional approaches had failed, and desperate times required desperate measures. The princess's performance that morning was masterful. Marcus watched from a distance as she approached Lady Morgana in the castle's rose garden, her posture conveying the perfect mixture of tentative hope and youthful uncertainty. Morgana's initial surprise quickly gave way to calculating interest as Isabella spoke of her desire to learn from such an accomplished woman and her excitement about gaining a new mother figure. Morgana's response was everything they had hoped for. She embraced Isabella with apparent warmth, speaking eloquently about their shared future and the important role the princess would play in the kingdom's prosperity. But Marcus, watching the interaction with the trained eye of a professional observer, could see the predatory satisfaction in Morgana's expression. She believed she had successfully manipulated a potential enemy into becoming an unwitting ally. Over the following days, Isabella spent increasing amounts of time with Lady Morgana, ostensibly learning about court protocol and wedding traditions. In reality, she was gathering intelligence about the conspiracy's scope and timeline. The information she reported during clandestine meetings with Marcus and Aldwin painted an increasingly dire picture. Morgana's network was more extensive than they had initially realized. She had been recruiting supporters for over 2 years, long before her arrival at Castle Valdris. The Northern Mountain clans weren't just providing guards. They were preparing to march on the kingdom's major cities as soon as Morgana gave the signal. The wedding wasn't just a ceremony. It was the beginning of a complete takeover of the kingdom. The merchant guilds had been promised favorable trade agreements and reduced taxation in exchange for their support. Several noble houses had been offered territorial expansions and political marriages that would increase their power. The military commanders have been bribed with promises of increased funding and opportunities for conquest. Morgana had something to offer everyone who might oppose her, and the few who couldn't be bought were being systematically replaced or eliminated. Most disturbing of all was Isabella's discovery of Morgana's long-term plans. The woman didn't intend to rule Valderis as an independent kingdom. She was working as an agent for a coalition of foreign powers who wanted to partition the realm among themselves. Morgana would serve as their puppet ruler until the conquest was complete, then disappear with her payment while the kingdom was carved up like a feast among hungry wolves. She talks about it so casually, Isabella reported during one of their secret meetings, as if she's discussing the weather rather than the destruction of everything our family has built over centuries. She has no love for this land or its people. We're all just commodities to be sold to the highest bidder. Marcus felt his anger burning like a forged fire in his chest. The woman who had seduced their king and infiltrated their home wasn't just a murderess and a usurper. She was a traitor to the very concept of sovereignty itself. The kingdom of Valderis would cease to exist if her plan succeeded, its people scattered or enslaved, its culture destroyed, its history forgotten. The breakthrough came 6 days before the scheduled wedding, when Isabella gained access to Morgana's private correspondence. Hidden in a secret compartment within an ornate jewelry box were letters that detailed every aspect of the conspiracy. Names, dates, payments, military movements, and timeline all laid out in Morgana's precise handwriting. But the most crucial discovery was a letter dated just 3 days earlier, addressed to someone identified only as the Northern Commander. The letter confirmed that King Edmund would not survive his wedding night, succumbing to what would appear to be a heart attack brought on by the excitement of his nuptials. Princess Isabella was to suffer a tragic accident during the chaos following her father's death, leaving Lady Morgana as the sole legitimate authority in the kingdom. Isabella's hands trembled as she shared this information with Marcus and Aldwin. The timeline had accelerated beyond their worst fears. They had less than a week to save the king's life, prevent the princess's murder, and expose a conspiracy that reached into every corner of the kingdom. "We can't wait for the wedding," Marcus said grimly. "If we allow events to proceed that far, we'll be too late to save anyone." Master Aldwin nodded agreement. "The king's condition is deteriorating rapidly. I'm not certain he can survive another week of poisoning, regardless of what Morgana has planned for the wedding night." Isabella stood quietly for a moment, weighing their options against the terrible constraints of time and circumstance. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the authority of a born ruler, despite her youth. "Then, we act tomorrow night," she said, "during the rehearsal dinner, when all of Morgana's key supporters will be present in the Great Hall. We'll have one chance to expose the entire conspiracy at once. If we fail, at least we'll have tried to save our kingdom from betrayal and destruction." Marcus looked at the young woman who had grown from a frightened girl into a potential queen before his eyes. Tomorrow night would determine the fate of everyone he had sworn to protect, and everything he held dear. The final confrontation was at hand, and there would be no second chances for any of them. The time for planning and preparation was over. Tomorrow, Captain Marcus Aldrin and Princess Isabella would either save the kingdom of Valderis or die trying. In the shadow of the castle walls where he had served so faithfully for 25 years, Marcus began to prepare for the most important battle of his life. The rehearsal dinner dawned gray and ominous, with storm clouds gathering over Castle Valderis like an army preparing for siege. Marcus had spent the sleepless night making final preparations, positioning his most trusted allies at strategic points throughout the castle, and ensuring that every detail of their desperate plan was understood by those brave enough to stand with them against Lady Morgana's conspiracy. 23 loyal guards had volunteered to risk their lives and careers for the chance to save their kingdom. These were men who had served alongside Marcus for years, who had witnessed the gradual corruption of their beloved home and chosen conscience over comfort. They understood that failure would mean death, but they also understood that inaction would mean the destruction of everything they had sworn to protect. Master Aldwin had prepared detailed documentation of his analysis of the poison wine, along with medical records showing the king's deterioration over the months since Lady Morgana's arrival. The evidence was compelling, but Marcus knew that evidence meant nothing without the power to present it effectively and the witnesses willing to act upon it. Princess Isabella had spent the morning in her chambers, ostensibly preparing for the evening's festivities, but actually steeling herself for what might be the last day of her life. She had written letters to be delivered if the worst happened, messages of love and gratitude to the servants who had cared for her, words of encouragement for the people of Alderus, and instructions for whoever might succeed her as the kingdom's protector. The great hall had been decorated with elaborate tapestries and golden candelabras for the rehearsal dinner. Lady Morgana had spared no expense in creating a setting worthy of a royal wedding, though Marcus now understood that the opulence served a darker purpose. The grandeur was designed to impress the foreign agents and mercenary commanders who would be evaluating the kingdom's wealth and strategic value as they planned its partition. As evening approached, the guests began to arrive. Marcus recognized most of the faces, but he now saw them through different eyes. Some were innocent nobles who had no idea they were attending the prelude to their kingdom's destruction. Others wore expressions of barely concealed anticipation, clearly aware of what was planned but pretending normalcy for the benefit of those around them. The foreign representatives were particularly easy to identify once Marcus knew what to look for. They carried themselves with the confidence of conquerors surveying their prize, their eyes cataloging the castle's defenses and treasures with professional interest. These were the men who would divide Valdres among themselves once Morgana had eliminated the royal family and opened the kingdom's gates. King Edmund appeared for the dinner in a state that made Marcus's heart ache with pity and rage. The once proud ruler moved with the uncertain steps of a much older man, his eyes unfocused, and his speech slightly slurred even though no wine had yet been served. Lady Morgana stayed close to his side, guiding his movements with the solicitous care of a devoted fiancée while actually ensuring that he remained dependent on her support. Princess Isabella made her entrance with perfect timing, appearing radiant in a gown of deep blue silk that complemented her mother's sapphire necklace. Her smile seemed genuine as she greeted the assembled guests, and her interaction with Lady Morgana displayed exactly the right mixture of affection and deference. Marcus felt a surge of admiration for the young woman's courage and acting ability, even as his protective instincts screamed warnings about the danger she was walking into. The dinner proceeded according to Morgana's carefully orchestrated plan. Toasts were offered to the happy couple, speeches were made about the bright future awaiting the kingdom, and elaborate courses were served with theatrical flourish. Marcus watched every detail, noting the positioning of Morgana's supporters, the location of exits, and the subtle signals being exchanged among the conspirators. The critical moment came during the final course, when Lady Morgana rose to offer what she described as a special toast to her beloved future husband. She held aloft a golden goblet filled with wine that Marcus recognized as the same drug vintage he had stolen for analysis. This was the moment when she would administer the final, fatal dose to King Edmund, beginning the sequence of events that would culminate in his death and Isabella's murder. Marcus felt his muscles tense as he prepared to signal his allies, but Princess Isabella moved first. Rising gracefully from her seat, she approached Lady Morgana with a warm smile and a request that seemed completely innocent to casual observers. Lady Morgana, Isabella said in a voice that carried clearly through the great hall, would you honor me by allowing me to assist with this special toast? I would so love to be part of this moment between you and my dear father. Morgana's eyes flickered with momentary uncertainty, but she couldn't refuse such a reasonable request without appearing churlish. She handed the goblet to Isabella with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, clearly calculating whether this development posed any threat to her plans. Isabella accepted the goblet with both hands, then turned to face the assembled guests with the poise of a natural leader. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the authority she had inherited from generations of rulers, and her words cut through the polite chatter like a sword through silk. "My lords and ladies," Isabella began, "before we share this toast to celebrate my father's upcoming marriage, I believe we should all understand exactly what we are celebrating." The hall fell silent, with every eye fixed on the young princess. Lady Morgana's smile faltered as she began to sense that something was going terribly wrong with her carefully laid plans. Isabella continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "This goblet contains wine that has been deliberately poisoned with substances designed to cloud my father's judgment and ultimately cause his death. The woman standing beside him is not Lady Morgana Blackthorne, whose family died decades ago, but an impostor who has infiltrated our home with the intention of murdering the royal family and delivering our kingdom to foreign conquerors." Gasps and exclamations erupted throughout the hall as the implications of Isabella's accusation sank in. Several guests rose from their seats in shock, while others remained frozen in place, uncertain how to respond to such an explosive revelation. Lady Morgana's mask finally slipped, revealing the cold calculation that had always lurked beneath her charming exterior. "These are the desperate lies of a jealous child," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite the chaos beginning to erupt around them. "Princess Isabella cannot bear to see her father find happiness after years of loneliness." But Isabella was prepared for this response. From within her gown, she produced the letters she had stolen from Morgana's private chambers, holding them high for all to see. These documents, written in this woman's own hand, detail every aspect of her conspiracy, Isabella declared. "They name her co-conspirators, outline her plans for my father's murder and my own assassination, and reveal her true loyalty to the foreign powers who seek to destroy our kingdom." Marcus saw Morgana's hand move toward a concealed weapon and knew that the moment for subtlety had passed. He gave the signal that sent his loyal guards into action throughout the hall, moving to surround the conspirators and secure the exits before anyone could escape to raise an alarm. The confrontation that followed was swift but chaotic. Morgana's mercenary guards, recognizing that their mission had been compromised, drew their weapons and attempted to fight their way out of the trap. The foreign agents tried to blend in with the panicking innocent guests, but Marcus's men had studied their faces and movements too carefully to be fooled by such tactics. The battle was fierce but brief, as the loyal guards' knowledge of the castle's layout and their superior coordination overcame the mercenaries' individual fighting skills. Within minutes, the immediate threat had been neutralized, though Marcus knew that the broader conspiracy would require weeks or months to fully unravel. Lady Morgana herself proved more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. When she realized that escape was impossible, she produced a vial of poison from her jewelry and attempted to take her own life rather than face justice. But Princess Isabella, demonstrating reflexes and courage that amazed everyone present, knocked the vial from Morgana's hand before the false queen could complete her final act of defiance. King Edmund, confused and disoriented by the sudden violence, collapsed into his chair as the effects of months of poisoning finally overwhelmed his compromised system. Master Aldwin rushed to his side, immediately beginning treatment that would hopefully reverse some of the damage that had been done to the royal constitution. As the chaos in the great hall gradually subsided, Marcus found himself looking at Princess Isabella with new eyes. The frightened girl who had wandered the castle corridors in terror had revealed herself to be a leader of exceptional courage and intelligence. Her quick thinking and decisive action had not only saved her father's life, but potentially prevented the destruction of their entire kingdom. The immediate crisis had passed, but Marcus knew that the real work was just beginning. The conspiracy's reach extended far beyond the castle walls, and rooting out all of Morgana's supporters would require careful investigation and decisive action. The foreign powers who had sponsored this plot would not simply abandon their ambitions because one agent had been captured, but As he watched Princess Isabella comfort her father while simultaneously directing the secure detention of the conspirators, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. The kingdom of Valdres had been tested by betrayal and treachery, but it had not been broken. The royal line would continue, the realm would endure, and justice would ultimately prevail. The woman who had called herself Lady Morgana Blackthorn sat in chains, her elaborate gown torn, and her perfectly styled hair disheveled from the struggle. Her cold eyes still held traces of the arrogance that had nearly destroyed a kingdom, but they also held the bitter knowledge that her carefully constructed plan had been undone by the courage of those she had dismissed as weak and naive. Marcus approached Princess Isabella as the last of the conspirators were led away to the castle's dungeons. The young woman looked exhausted, but triumphant, her green eyes bright with the satisfaction of a duty completed despite overwhelming odds. "Your Highness," Marcus said, offering her the formal bow due to someone who had proven herself worthy of royal authority. "Your courage tonight has saved not just your father's life, but the freedom of every person in this kingdom." Isabella smiled, and for the first time in months, it was a smile without shadows or fear. "We saved each other, Captain Aldrin, and we saved our home. Now we must work together to ensure that such a threat never comes so close to success again." As the first light of dawn began to filter through the Great Hall's windows, Marcus realized that the kingdom of Valdres had not just survived its greatest crisis, but emerged stronger for having faced it. The bonds between ruler and protector, between sovereign and subject, had been tested in the crucible of betrayal and had proven unbreakable. The royal guard had kept his oath, the princess had claimed her inheritance of courage and wisdom, and the kingdom would endure to see another generation of peace and prosperity. The nightmare was over, but the lessons learned in darkness would guide them toward a brighter future. Months had passed since the night that would forever be remembered as the cleansing of Valdres, when Princess Isabella's courage and Captain Marcus Aldrin's loyalty had saved the kingdom from destruction. The Great Hall where Lady Morgana's conspiracy had been exposed now hosted a different kind of gathering, as representatives from across the realm assembled for Princess Isabella's coronation as crown princess and official heir to the throne. King Edmund's recovery had been slower and more challenging than anyone had initially hoped. Master Aldwin's treatments had successfully purged the worst of the poisons from the royal system, but months of systematic drugging had taken a toll that would never be completely overcome. The king's memory remained partially impaired, and his stamina was significantly reduced from his former robust health. Rather than see this as a tragedy, however, Edmund had embraced the opportunity to gradually transfer more responsibility to his daughter, recognizing in her the leadership qualities that would serve the kingdom well. The investigation that followed Morgana's capture had revealed the full scope of the conspiracy that had nearly destroyed Valdres. The woman's real name was Lina Shadowmere, and she was indeed connected to northern nobility, though not in the way she had claimed. Her family had been stripped of lands and titles for treason decades earlier, but unlike the official record suggested, some members had survived and harbored dreams of revenge against the crown that had destroyed their power. Lina had spent years training in the arts of seduction, poison, and political manipulation, funded by a coalition of foreign kingdoms who saw Valdres's growing prosperity as a threat to their own ambitions. Her mission had been to infiltrate the royal court, eliminate the ruling family, and prepare the kingdom for conquest and partition among her sponsors. The network she had built within Valdres was extensive but ultimately fragile. Once the key nodes were identified and removed, the entire structure collapsed like a house built on sand. Some conspirators fled the kingdom in the chaos following her arrest, but most were captured and faced justice for their betrayal. The foreign gold that had funded the plot was seized and redistributed to repair the damage caused by the conspiracy. Marcus had found the months following the coronation to be among the most satisfying of his long career. Princess Isabella had insisted on promoting him to Lord Captain of the Royal Guard, a position that came with significant expanded authority and the responsibility for rebuilding the kingdom's security apparatus from the ground up. The new guard were chosen not just for their fighting skills, but for their demonstrated loyalty and their understanding that protecting the realm meant more than just defending the castle walls. The young woman who had once wandered the corridors in terror had blossomed into a leader whose wisdom and compassion impressed even the most skeptical noble observers. Isabella had spent the months since her father's recovery traveling throughout the kingdom, meeting with merchants, farmers, craftsmen, and soldiers to better understand the needs and concerns of the people she would one day rule. Her approach to governance emphasized transparency and communication, a direct response to the secrecy and manipulation that had nearly destroyed their home. The relationship between Marcus and Isabella had evolved as well, deepening from the protective bond between guard and charge into something more resembling a partnership between trusted advisors. Isabella valued Marcus's experience and practical wisdom, while Marcus found himself constantly impressed by the princess's ability to see solutions where others saw only problems. On the morning of the coronation ceremony, Marcus stood in his familiar position overlooking the castle courtyard, but his perspective had changed dramatically from those dark days when danger had lurked in every shadow. The crowds gathering below were genuinely celebratory, drawn by loyalty and hope rather than commanded by fear or obligation. The foreign visitors were legitimate diplomats and trade representatives rather than spies and assassins. The atmosphere was one of renewal and optimism rather than suspicion and dread. Princess Isabella found Marcus at his post, as she often did when she needed a moment of quiet reflection before facing the demands of royal duty. She wore the ceremonial armor that had belonged to her warrior queen grandmother, a choice that sent a clear message about the kind of ruler she intended to become. "Are you ready for this, Your Highness?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer from the confidence in her bearing. Isabella smiled, and Marcus was struck once again by how much she had changed from the frightened girl who had once sought his protection. "I'm as ready as anyone can be to accept responsibility for the lives and happiness of thousands of people," she replied. "But I know I won't be facing that responsibility alone." The coronation ceremony itself was a masterpiece of pageantry and symbolism, carefully designed to demonstrate the kingdom's strength and stability to both internal and external observers. Representatives from neighboring realms who had once viewed Valdres as a potential target for expansion now spoke respectfully of trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. The message was clear. The kingdom of Valdres had not only survived its greatest crisis, but emerged stronger and more unified than ever. When King Edmund placed the crown of the heir apparent on his daughter's head, the roar of approval from the assembled crowd could be heard throughout the city. Marcus felt a surge of pride and satisfaction that made all the dangers and sacrifices of the previous months worthwhile. This was what he had sworn to protect 25 years earlier, and this was what made his oath meaningful. The celebration that followed lasted 3 days and drew visitors from across the known world. Musicians, artists, merchants, and scholars came to witness the renewal of a kingdom that had faced destruction and chosen defiance instead. The stories of Princess Isabella's courage and Captain Marcus's loyalty spread far beyond Valdres's borders, inspiring others who faced their own struggles against corruption and betrayal. But perhaps the most meaningful moment for Marcus came during a private dinner on the final night of the celebration. Isabella had invited the core group of allies who had risked everything to save the kingdom. Marcus himself, Master Aldwin, Thomas the steward, Sarah the kitchen maid, and a dozen of the guards who had stood with them during the final confrontation. "I want you all to understand," Isabella said as they raised their goblets in a final toast, "that what we accomplished was not the action of any single person, but the result of people who chose to put their love of home and family above their own safety. That spirit of sacrifice and service will be the foundation of everything we build going forward." Master Aldwin, now bearing the title of Royal Physician Emeritus in recognition of his crucial role in exposing the conspiracy, raised his goblet with hands that no longer trembled. To Princess Isabella, he said, who showed us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to do what is right despite that fear. The toast was echoed by everyone present, but Marcus found himself thinking not just about what they had accomplished, but about what it meant for the future. The kingdom of Aldris would face other challenges in the years to come, other threats from both within and without. But the events of the past months had proven that when good people stood together and refused to surrender to evil, even the most sophisticated conspiracy could be defeated. As the evening drew to a close, and the guests departed to their various duties and homes, Marcus found himself alone with Princess Isabella in the same rose garden where their conspiracy had first taken shape. The flowers that had been withering under the shadow of Morgana's presence had bloomed again, their vibrant colors and sweet fragrance a symbol of the kingdom's renewal. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had chosen differently?" Isabella asked, her voice contemplative in the soft evening air. "If we had remained silent and hoped that someone else would solve the problem?" Marcus considered the question carefully before responding. "I think about it sometimes," he admitted, "but I've come to believe that some choices are not really choices at all. When faced with the destruction of everything you love, there's only one path forward for people like us." Isabella nodded, understanding the truth in his words. "The responsibilities of leadership are not always comfortable," she said, "but they're always clear. We protect what matters, we serve those who depend on us, and we leave the kingdom stronger than we found it." As they walked back toward the castle together, Marcus reflected on the strange turns that life could take. 6 months earlier, he had been a loyal but unremarkable captain of guards, content to serve his duties and avoid political complications. The crisis had transformed him into something he had never expected to become, a key advisor to the future queen and a guardian of the kingdom's institutional memory. Princess Isabella had undergone an even more dramatic transformation, evolving from a sheltered royal daughter into a leader whose wisdom and courage promised a golden age for Valdris. The trial she had endured had not hardened her heart or made her cynical, but had deepened her understanding of both the fragility and the strength of the bonds that held their society together. The kingdom of Valdris entered its new era with confidence and purpose, secure in the knowledge that its leaders had been tested in the crucible of crisis and proven worthy of the trust placed in them. The royal guard who had once stood silent watch over sleeping corridors now helped guide policy and strategy. The princess who had once wandered those same corridors in fear now walked them as the acknowledged protector of her people's hopes and dreams. In the years that followed, historians would debate the precise sequence of events that had saved the kingdom from destruction. Some would emphasize the importance of Isabella's courage in the final confrontation. Others would highlight Marcus's patient investigation and network building, and still others would focus on the collective action of ordinary people who chose to resist corruption and betrayal. But Marcus knew that the real lesson of their story was simpler and more profound than any academic analysis could capture. When people who love their home and their neighbors choose to stand together against those who would destroy what they hold dear, evil plans can be defeated and good can triumph, even against overwhelming odds. The royal guard had kept his oath, the princess had claimed her inheritance, and the kingdom endured. In a world where darkness sometimes seemed to be gaining ground, the story of Valdris stood as proof that light could still prevail when decent people refused to surrender to despair. As Marcus took his position for the night watch, looking out over a realm at peace and a people secure in their freedom, he felt the deep satisfaction that comes from a duty completed and a promise kept. The kingdom of Valdris would face whatever challenges the future might bring with courage, wisdom, and the unbreakable bonds of loyalty that had been forged in the fires of their greatest trial. The story of the royal guard who broke through the curtain of deception to save his kingdom had become legend, but the man himself remained what he had always been, a protector who understood that some things are worth any sacrifice, and that honor is not just a word but a way of life that defines who we are when everything else falls away. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the castle slept and the kingdom dreamed of tomorrow's possibilities, Captain Marcus Aldrin stood his watch and smiled. The oath he had taken 25 years earlier had led him through darkness and danger to this moment of peace and hope. Whatever the future might bring, he would be ready to face it, standing guard over the people and principles that had given his life meaning and purpose. The kingdom of Aldris was safe. Princess Isabella was prepared to lead them into a bright future, and the royal guard's vigil continued, eternal and unbroken, in the service of all that was good and worthy of protection in their world.